In the cradle of the Bitterroot Mountains, where the Montana sky stretched like an endless blue quilt stitched with silver threads of river and the faint, haunting call of loons echoing at dusk, Eliza Kane swung her axe with the precision of a woman who had long ago learned that survival was an art form. The blade bit deep into the pine log, sending chips flying like confetti from a solitary celebration, each strike a declaration against the vast, indifferent wilderness. At 32, Eliza was a portrait of quiet ferocity, her auburn hair tied back in a frayed kerchief, freckles dusted across her nose like stars spilled from the night, and hands that bore the scars of a life unyielding. She was building her cabin, one log at a time, not for the tall tales that frontiersmen spun in smoky saloons, nor for the fleeting admiration of passers-by on the dusty trail to Jackson's Crossing. No, this was for her, a sanctuary carved from the earth, a testament to the roots she had never truly known. Her father, Jack Kane, had been a shadow puppet of a man, charming when the whiskey flowed, vanishing like mist when it didn't. He'd dragged her from Dakota Badlands to Wyoming gulches, promising gold strikes and grand adventures, only to leave her at 16 with a battered claim deed and a satchel of regrets. "Make something of it, girl," he'd slurred one last time before riding off toward the horizon, his silhouette swallowed by the heat haze. Eliza she'd panned rivers until her fingers pruned, trapped beaver for pelts that bought her first axe, and now, in this forgotten valley, she claimed her piece of forever. The cabin's foundation was stubborn, rocks pried from the creek bed, mud mixed with straw under a relentless sun, but with every log stacked, Eliza felt the weight of her orphan heart lighten, just a fraction. It was her defiance, her dream woven in timber, walls to hold back the wind, a hearth for stories she'd tell herself on lonely nights. Unbeknownst to her, from the craggy ridge that flanked her valley like a watchful sentinel, Caleb Thorne observed. He was 41, a cowboy whose life had been etched by the sun into lines of quiet sorrow, his frame lean and weathered like old saddle leather. His Stetson, faded to the color of desert sand, shadowed eyes the deep gray of thunderheads rolling over sagebrush plains. Whiskey, his bay gelding with a white blaze like a lightning scar, cropped at the sparse grass beside him, but Caleb's gaze was fixed below, on the solitary figure wielding her axe. He'd first spotted her a fortnight past, while trailing strays from his ranch, a modest spread of 200 acres, fenced against coyotes and memories. The sight had rooted him, a woman, alone, raising a home from nothing. It stirred something in him, a longing he'd buried deeper than Clara's grave. Clara, the name alone was a knife twist. 3 winters ago, the fever had come like a thief in the night, slipping through the cracks of their cabin door on the wings of a prairie wind. She'd been heavy with their first child, her laughter like wind chimes in the kitchen as she hummed hymns over the cradle she'd carved from cottonwood. Caleb had ridden 3 days for the doctor, only to return to silence, Clara pale and still, the babe lost with her. The ranch hands had offered condolences, stiff and awkward, before drifting away like smoke. Caleb stayed, mending fences that never stayed mended, herding cattle that lowed mournfully at dawn. He longed for a family, for the chaos of small feet pattering across floorboards, for hands in his to guide through the world. But grief was a jealous lover. It whispered that he was broken, unfit for second chances. Until Eliza, watching her, Caleb felt the stirrings of envy, admiration, and a fragile hope, like the first crack of green in spring-thawed soil. The air grew crisp with the promise of autumn when their paths converged, not in thunderous drama, but in the gentle inevitability of shared labor. Eliza was wrestling the massive keystone log for the cabin's northwest corner, its weight defying her leverage, sweat tracing rivulets down her back despite the chill. She grunted, muscles coiling like ropes under strain, when a low voice cut through the rustle of aspen leaves. "Need a hand with that, ma'am? Looks like it's got a mind of its own." She whirled, axe half raised, heart hammering like a blacksmith's hammer. There, silhouetted against the ridge, stood the cowboy, tall as the lodgepoles that flanked her sight, broad-shouldered in a wool duster patched at the elbows, his boots planted firm in the duff. Up close, he was less myth and more man, a faint scar tracing his jaw like a forgotten riverbed, hands calloused from reins and rope, and eyes that held no threat, only a quiet curiosity. Eliza lowered the axe, wiping her brow with a mud-streaked sleeve. "I manage," she said, voice steady but laced with the wariness of one who'd learned trust was a luxury. "Eliza Kane, this is my claim, Caleb Thorne," he replied, tipping his hat with a nod that spoke of old-world courtesy. "Neighbor, sort of, my fence line kisses that ridge yonder. Been ridin' by, seen you at it. No offense meant by the watchin', just, ain't every day you see grit like that." He glanced at the log, then back to her, a half-smile tugging his lips. "That one's a brute, let me spot it, at least. Won't take but a minute." She eyed him, weighing the offer against the solitude she'd armored herself in. Folks in these parts were salt of the earth, trappers and sodbusters who nodded at the trading post but kept their distances, lest the mountains, isolation breed too much familiarity. But there was no pity in his stance, no presumption, just the practical offer of a man who knew the bite of heavy lifting. "All right," she conceded, stepping aside, "but it's my cabin, your help don't make it yours." "Fair enough." Together, they shouldered the log, her on one end, him on the other, and maneuvered it into the notch with a synchronized heave. It settled true, the thud resonating like a heartbeat in the clearing. Eliza straightened, a rare laugh bubbling up, unbidden and bright as a mountain stream. "Well, damn, that felt easier than wrestlin' a bear." Caleb chuckled, a low rumble that warmed the air between them. "Bears got more fight. This, just stubborn." As the sun began its descent, gilding the peaks in molten gold, he didn't ride off immediately. Instead, he lingered by the half-formed wall, pulling a twist of tobacco from his vest. "Mind if I ask what brings a woman out here alone? Not judgin', just the valley's short on stories that ain't about claim jumpers or ghost towns." Eliza leaned against the log, considering. "Same as you, I reckon. Land, a place to plant roots." She didn't elaborate on the father who'd uprooted her life like a weed, nor the nights she'd lain under stars too vast, wondering if she was visible at all. Instead, she turned the question, "And you, cowboy watchin' from the hills, got a spread worth the view?" He nodded toward the east, where smoke from his chimney might just curl on a clear day. "Thorn Ranch, cattle, mostly, enough to keep the wolves at bay." A pause, heavy with what he left unsaid, the empty chair at his table, the cradle gathering dust. "Lost my wife a few years back. Makes a man reflective." The vulnerability hung there, fragile as frost on a web. Eliza felt it tug at her own guarded places. "Sorry for your loss," she murmured, genuine as the earth beneath her boots. "Loss like that, it don't feel easy." "No," he agreed softly, "it don't." As twilight deepened, painting the sky in hues of lavender and indigo, Caleb mounted whiskey with a tip of his hat. "I'll swing by tomorrow, if it's all right." Got a spare drawknife, might make those notches cleaner. She watched him go, the horse's hooves clipping softly on the trail, and for the first time in years, the valley didn't echo quite so empty. What began as neighborly aid blossomed into a rhythm as steady as the seasons. Caleb arrived at first light, thermos of coffee steaming like morning mist, black and bitter, just how Eliza liked it, though she'd never said. He'd tether whiskey to a sapling and roll up his sleeves, showing her the tricks of the trade, how to saddle notch for a snug fit, the angle of the adze to shave bark without splintering the grain. Like this, he'd say, his hand steady over hers on the handle, the warmth of his palm a fleeting anchor against the tool's chill. Sparks danced in the air, and Eliza found herself lingering on the scent of him, leather, pine tar, and the faint earthiness of sun-baked trails. In return, she shared her vision. Sketches on scraps of paper, yellowed from her pack. A wide porch for rocking chairs that didn't yet exist. A loft window frame to catch the Perseid showers in August. A root cellar dug deep against the lean winters. Gonna plant an orchard come spring, she'd declare over midday jerky and hardtack, her eyes alight. Apples, maybe pears, something to sweeten the air. Caleb listened, truly, his questions pulling threads from her past she'd thought frayed beyond mending. He spoke little of his own scars, but in the quiet moments, passing a canteen, stacking dovetailed ends, stories slipped out. The cattle drive from Texas when he was green, dodging Comanche raids under a blood moon. The night Clara taught him to waltz in the lamplight, her bare feet on his boots. Yet kindness was their unspoken language, woven into the daily weave. Eliza, with her orphan's empathy, had always been a quiet giver. As a girl, she'd slip bread to the urchins in Boomtown alleys. Now, she left wild berry baskets at the door of old man Hargrove, whose rheumatism kept him from the brambles. Caleb noticed, said nothing at first, but mirrored it in his way, mending the frayed harness on her mule without fanfare, or riding extra miles to fetch nails from the post when a storm pinned her down. One afternoon, as thunderheads gathered like uninvited guests, he arrived soaked to the bone, a burlap sack of potatoes slung over his shoulder. "Widow Murphy's boys are growin' like weeds," he explained gruffly. "Figured you'd have use for the trade. Your herbs for their coughs last winter saved my stock hand." Eliza accepted the sack, her smile soft. "Selfless sort, ain't you? Valley could use more of that." It was true, in this frontier forge, where hardship hammered souls thin, humanity shone in the small generosities, the shared fence post, the loaned mule. Caleb, watching Eliza pack chinks with clay and moss, her focus unyielding, felt his longing shift. She wasn't Clara Secco, but a new verse, resilient, radiant in her solitude. It scared him, that pull, but he let it draw him closer, one log at a time. November arrived with a vengeance, the mountains donning white caps as if girding for war. Eliza had heeded the almanac's warnings. Extra cordwood stacked under lean-tos, jerky strips hung like grim garlands, but pride, that old companion, made her linger outdoors too long one fateful afternoon. She was felling a strayed grain fir for the rafters, the axe singing through the trunk, when the sky darkened like spilled ink. The first flakes whispered, then screamed, a blizzard birthed in the northwest, fiercer than any in local lore. Winds howled through the passes, visibility shrinking to arm's length, and Eliza bolted for her half cabin, the structure more promise than shelter, 3 walls up, roof a hasty thatch of branches and oiled canvas. Inside, she kindled a fire with trembling hands, the flames guttering against drafts that slithered like serpents. Her stores were lean, a heel of cornbread, a pouch of beans, but worse was the isolation, the storm's roar mocking her independence. Memories clawed up, huddling in a soddy as a child while thunder shook the plains, her father absent again, leaving her to fend against the dark. She rationed the wood, hurling into her bedroll as night fell, the cold a living thing that seeped into her bones. Hours blurred, feverish dreams tangled with wakefulness, and doubt whispered, what if this is the log too heavy? What if the cabin, and you, crumble before completion? From his ranch, Caleb had watched the clouds boil, black and brooding, his gut twisting with echoes of that long-ago winter. Clara's fever had started with chills, escalated in isolation. He'd be damned if history repeated on his watch. Saddling whiskey in the gathering gale, he loaded saddlebags with provisions, flour, salt pork, a medicinal tincture from the post's apothecary, and plunged into the whiteout. The trail vanished under drifts, the horse floundering belly deep, but Caleb pressed on, cursing the wind, praying to a god he'd half forgotten. Twilight brought him to her clearing, the cabin a faint glow through the maelstrom. "Eliza," he roared, pounding the door with a gloved fist. "It's Caleb, open up." The door cracked, spilling lamplight, and there she stood, shivering, lips blue-tinged, eyes wide with a mix of relief and defiance. "You fool," she rasped, pulling him in. "Could have been your grave out there. Worth the risk." He shook snow from his duster like a dog, unpacking his bounty onto her rough-hewn table. The fire roared back to life under his coaxing, and they shared a hasty stew simmered over the flames, the storm a muffled fury outside. Warmth returned in tendrils, loosening tongues as the night deepened. Caleb broke first, staring into the embers. "Can't lose another to the cold. Clara." It was quick, but the ridin' for help that never came in time. "Left me hollow, watching you build, though it's like seein' what I forgot, that life's for makin', not just mendin'." Eliza's throat tightened, the fire's glow casting shadows that danced like ghosts. She reached for his hand across the table, rough against rough. "I ain't got a grave full of what-ifs, but plenty empty. Hall left when I was nothin' but braids and questions. Bounced from kin to kinder, learnin' quick that trust is a debt unpaid. This cabin, it's me payin' it forward to myself. But nights like this make you wonder if roots stick without someone to share the soil." In that shared confession, the air shifted, charged as the storm beyond. Caleb's thumb traced her knuckles, a tentative bridge. "You ain't wonderin' alone, Eliza. Not if you'll have me stick around." The words hung, profound in their simplicity. Realization dawning that their solitudes weren't curses, but invitations, to lean, to lift, to love anew. She squeezed his hand, chairs salting the moment, and as the blizzard wailed its finale, they talked until the stars pierced the clouds, weaving futures from frayed threads. Dawn broke crystalline, the world a hush of hoarfrost and possibility. Caleb helped shore the weakened walls, his presence now a comfort, not a courtesy. Laughter returned with the sun, shared jests over crooked notches, his mock horror at her frontier cuisine of beans and biscuits. But the true pivot came with the thaw's tidings, carried by a lathered pony from Jackson's Crossing. Widow Murphy's boy Timmy, the eldest at 12, struck down by pneumonia. The doc was stranded across the snow-choked pass, and the child's breaths rasped like bellows in a forge. Eliza's face drained of color. She'd known the Murphys since staking her claim, bartered eggs for mended trousers, watched Timmy's gap-toothed grin as he chased chickens, dreamed big of becoming a rancher like his pa, lost to a stampede 2 summers back. Can't let him slip away, Eliza said, voice fierce, already rummaging her herb stores. Willow bark shaved fine for fever, elderberry syrup sweetened with honey, poultices of mustard seed. Mrs. Murphy's got 4 more clingin' to her skirts. They need him whole. Caleb nodded. No hesitation. Saddle up, we'll get you there. But the pass was a beast awakened. Avalanches rumbling in the heights, ice-glazed trails slick as sin. They rode out at midday, Eliza on her sturdy mare Bess, Caleb leading with Whiskey's sure-footed gait. The ascent clawed at them, wind whipping like lashes, snow devils swirling in eddies. Halfway up, disaster struck. A hidden crust gave way under Bess's hoof, the mare pitching sideways. Eliza tumbled into a drift, the world inverting in a blur of white and pain. Her ankle twisted with a sickening pop, herbs scattering like fallen leaves, and she bid back a cry, scrambling to her knees. Eliza, Caleb was off his horse in a heartbeat, sliding down to her side, his face a mask of terror. He cradled her leg, probing gently, the bone bruised but not shattered. Stay. I'll go alone. No. She pushed up, grimacing through the throb, gathering the spilled pouches with shaking hands. Boys waden, pain's just, temporary. Like everything out here, it was her selflessness laid bare, a force that humbled Caleb to his core. This woman, battered by the wild, shows compassion over caution, pouring her light into others' shadows. He bound her ankle with his bandana, the fabric blooming red from a shallow cut, then hoisted her onto Whiskey's back, sharing the saddle's sway. Lean on me, he murmured, arm secure around her waist. They inched onward, the mountains, majesty turned menacing, but united in purpose. Murphy's ranch huddled in a lower hollow, smoke wisping desperately from the chimney. Mrs. Murphy met them at the door, eyes hollowed by vigil, Timmy Abed in the corner, skin flushed and slick. God bless you, she whispered, ushering them in. The cabin was a tableau of desperation. Younger siblings huddled by the stove, broth simmering forgotten. Eliza, limping but unbowed, knelt by the boy's pallet, brewing her remedies over the hearth. Easy now, Timmy, she soothed, spooning the bitter tea past cracked lips, her voice a lullaby against his delirium. Caleb fetched snow from the eave for compresses, his cowboy strength gentled to dabbing fevered brows, telling rambling tales of rodeos to distract the wide-eyed little ones, how he'd once roped a longhorn with a whoop and a prayer. Hours bled into eternity. Timmy's coughs racking the rafters, Eliza's whispers weaving spells of resilience, Caleb's steady presence the anchor. At midnight, as the fire popped like distant gunfire, the boy's fever crested and broke, sweat beading his brow, breaths deepening to even sighs. Mrs. Murphy collapsed in sobs of gratitude, clasping their hands. You too, like kin from the heavens. In this God-forsaken stretch, kindness like yours, it's the real miracle. Dawn crept in, gilding the frost-laced windows, and in that sacred hush, the climax unfurled. Caleb, watching Eliza tuck the blanket around Timmy, her face etched with exhaustion yet aglow with quiet triumph, felt his world realign. She had given everything, body, heart, herbs from her scant store, and in doing so, mended fractures in him he deemed irreparable. He crossed the room, dropping to one knee on the worn puncheon floor, dust motes swirling like blessings. Eliza Kane, he said, voice rough with emotion but clear as a mountain stream, you've been buildin' more than a cabin these months. You've built a home in this widower's heart, walls of laughter, rafters of hope, a foundation of the family I thought lost. Marry me, let's raise these logs together, and the life they'll hold, one act of grace at a time. Cheers traced clean paths through the grime on her cheeks as she drew him up, their foreheads meeting in a vow sealed before witnesses of wide-eyed children and a weary widow. "Yes, Caleb Thorne," she breathed, "with all my stubborn soul. We've saved more than a boy tonight, we've saved us." The valley buzzed with the news, rippling outward like a stone skipped across still water. Neighbors converged on Eliza's site, Hargrove with his hammer, the sodbusters from the flats with saws and shingles, transforming the half-cabin into a haven by week's end. Hammers rang like joyful peals, laughter chasing away the last snow shadows. Caleb's ranch found new rhythm too, hands pitching in extra, the empty cradle polished and waiting. Spring arrived in a riot of color, hask flowers nodding purple heads, the creek swelling with melt psalm. They wed under a canopy of quaking aspens, the rivers murmur their choir, vows exchanged simple and true, to build, to hold, to love through storm and sun. The community gathered, hot luck spread on blankets, venison roast, cornbread sticky with honey, Murphy's pie bursting with early berries. Timmy, spry as a colt, tossed wildflowers at their feet, his grin the sunniest blessing. Life unfolded in tender abundance. Caleb taught Eliza the ranch's ways, branding irons glowing at roundup, the art of reading cattle's moods in a flick of ear or tail. She, in turn, coaxed green from the stubborn soil, apple slips taking root in the orchard, a kitchen garden bursting with carrots and kale. Evenings found them on the porch swing he'd hewn from oak, whiskey dozing in the meadow, stars pricking the velvet sky. Conversations deepened, dreams of expanding the spread, perhaps a schoolhouse for the valley young'uns, funded by communal barn raisings. By autumn's amber glow, Eliza's belly swelled with their first child, a secret shared in whispers over the cradle. Mornings brought nausea chased by Caleb's steady hand on her back, evenings his tale spun for the babe-to-be. Your ma, she built this world with fire in her veins. One golden dusk, as leaves drifted light confetti, they sat entwined, her head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing the curve of new life. We did this, she murmured, awe-threading her voice. From logs and longing to family. Caleb kissed her temple, the widower's ache transmuted to profound peace. Proof of it, Eliza, kindness ain't the soft path, it's the timber that holds when gales howl, the selflessness that turns strangers to soulmates, storms to stories. In the grand American saga, where pioneers' ghosts linger in every furrow and fence, the power of humanity endures not in conquest, but in connection. It whispers that no valley is too shadowed for light, no heart too scarred for second bloom. In acts of quiet generosity, a hand extended in blizzard, a herb pouch braved over ice, we forge the unbreakable, homes not just of wood, but of woven lives. And so, as the sun dips behind the bitterroots, casting long shadows of promise, hope rises eternal, one compassionate dawn at a time.